What is up, YouTube? My hair isn't really YouTube worthy today, but action was a bit slow on the 500 Zoom games. So I decided to record another high stakes Fridays video, as I've collected a couple of interesting hands played very recently on the 5k games. So let's jump right into the action. So all hands will feature ja.sam.gale, or however you pronounce that again, like I don't know. But it's been around for a while, and it just happened to play a couple of interesting hands recently, so I decided to focus this video on him. So in the first hand, middle position will open and Ja will 3-bet from the small blind. So I think it's important to take a note of the positions, as well very often these 3-bet pots will be small blind versus button and stuff like that, but small blind versus middle position will be significantly tighter than small blind versus button, obviously. So this means the 3-better's range will be a bit tighter, but this also means that middle position might not always 4-bet ace king, or might not always 4-bet pocket checks. So small blind has to play a bit more careful. Anyway, a really good board for the 3-better, and small blind is opting for the 1/3 pot strategy here, which I think is fine, and I think he can basically c-bet his full range with this strategy here. Middle position, NL Zwerver NL, or however you're supposed to pronounce that, has to defend pretty wide versus his 1/3 pot c-bet, but remember he's flooding from MP, so he doesn't have all the junky hands button might have, for example. And then we see a 2 of spades turn, which brings a backdoor flush draw. Our small blind will continue to barrel aggressively, continue to barrel with the ace king, the king queen, and then as bluffs you might have some flush draws, some gut shots, some open-enders, stuff like that. And he will have to give up with some part of his range. He'll also try to check with a couple of medium to stronger hands, so he's not totally helpless when he does check on the turn. So we see him barrel for this size on the turn. I think that's the way to go. After you c-bet 1/3 pot on the flop, you usually start to bet a bit more polarized on the turn for a bigger bet size. So he barrels and middle position decides to call. This turn seems easy for a middle position to defend often enough. He has some kings and jacks to call with, and just calls with some of the stronger draws, the flush draws and the open-enders, and starts folding hand like ace-10 or ace-queen without the flush draw. Then this river, not a very good one for our 3-better, as it removes some of his trip combos, and it also weakens the strength of a hand like pocket aces, since pocket aces now loses to the trips middle position might have. So this is a river that's not going to be barreled too often. ja.sam.gale decides to check. Middle position jams, and he gets called by our small blind 3-better with ace-5, which is what the f for me. So let's analyze this hand now that we know which hand both players have. I think the pre-flop flat with ace-king off with these positions is fine. I'd guess he has a mixed strategy, but he can definitely mix in flats with the ace-king off there with these positions, as it's less of a slam dunk get it in pre-flop when it's small blind versus middle position. So that's maybe the first noteworthy thing, that middle position shows up with ace-king off. Then ace-5 of clubs. I think the flop is standard, the c-bet. But then on the deuce turn, sometimes in 3-bet pots you see that you barrel with some of these real aces to have extra bluffs, as they usually they block the strongest top pairs with the ace blocker. and they can end up being fine 3 barrels that way, as they don't block any missed draws, stuff like that. But with these positions on this turn, I think the ace-5 of clubs is just going to be a check folds on the turn, and it's just too loose to barrel here. Then on the river, okay, it doesn't block missed spade draw, but if you look at the potential bluffs Annals whatever has on this river, I think it's basically only 10-9 suited and queen 10 suited. And other than that, like I said, I think he can have ace king, he can have pocket jacks, he can have pocket eights, and it just has other kings. Like I think he has too much value and not enough bluffs for ace-5 of clubs to be a hero check call there. I think it's just a river where with these positions there's not going to be enough bluffs, and you could even lose against a bluff by check calling ace-5 of clubs. So I think middle position might not have enough bluffs, so maybe he needs, or he will turn a hand like 9-8 of spades or 8-7 of spades into a bluff on the river when he realizes that he has a decent amount of trip combos, some other strong hands, and only 10-9 suited and queen 10 suited as missed draws. Okay, no, maybe he also has ace queen of spades and ace 10 of spades, so maybe he turns those in a bluff instead of the 8x. But ace 5 suited also even loses against ace queen. So yeah, I really don't like this this hero call. That's obviously when I analyze the hand with the info I have. As usual, you never know what these guys have going on with each other, which reads they have, or whatever. So okay, that's the first hand. So in this next hand, the hero of our video will open under the gun, and he faces a 3-bet from OTB Red Baron on the button. Again, slightly tighter 3-betting positions than we might be used to. It's button versus under the gun. OTB is definitely a loose, aggressive enough player, but it's not the same as a button versus cutoff 3-bet or a small blind versus button 3-bet, stuff like that. So again, because of this, the 3-better's range will be a bit tighter than we might be used to from some other 3-bet pots. And the under the gun will flat some hands that could be 4-bet get-it-ins in other positions, like flatting again some amount of ace-king off, maybe some pocket jacks, some pocket queens, in addition to the regular flats. So this board, the overcards don't really connect, obviously. And the 3-better's range will be very overcard heavy, but the 3-better will have aces, kings, queens, jacks, 10s, maybe some 9s. So while his bluffs don't improve, he still has some advantage of the overpairs. So he goes for not really 1/3 pot bet, but not half pot bet either. On this board you can go for a variety of strategies. I think usually, well, some people just go for the 1/3 pot bet, which is fine in my opinion, but there might be some EV gain to be had on these lower boards by betting for a bit bigger size. So OTB, who am I to argue with the sizing OTB picks? So this is what he does. Under the gun, he check calls. So it's definitely going to be check calling with some pocket pairs. But because of the small bet and the dryish board, Ja will also be check raising this board relatively aggressively with some sets, and maybe if he flats a hand like queens pre-flop, he might check raise it here for value / protection. But we see a check call, a check, and a barrel from OTB. So again, we see the same pattern, starting a bit smallish on the flop, but starting to bet bigger on the turn, where bets usually get more polarized. Now, to show up with bluffs on this turn, OTB can't just stick to traditional semi-bluffs. if he only barrels with his flush draws, his gut shots, and his open-enders, he probably doesn't have enough bluffs. But I'm sure OTP is aware of this, and he will add some overcards, just barreling the queen jack of spades or something like that. Some of these overcards, they have equity to improve versus a hand like pocket tens or a pair of nines, but they also block some of the hands that ja.sam will use to call down on the river. So queen jack blocks pocket queens and pocket jack. So if ja.sam has some of these, then bluffing with queen jack blocks some of the calling range versus the third barrel. It's all very complicated, all these blocking effects. But when you analyze a hand like this in a solver, you see that Button will be barreling aggressively with his overcards. He can just get away with it because he still has those strong overpairs. And then on the 3 river, under the gun checks and OTB jams. Jams his pocket jacks, which is on the thinner side in my opinion for these positions. But ja.sam.gale shows up with ace king off. So what do we think of that? Our other ace high hero call down. Well, I do think it's more reasonable here. It's probably a call I won't end up making often enough, but I think I should. So when you flat some amount of your ace king pre-flop, on this flop it is a standard check call. And then on the turn, you can call some of your ace kings again, and I think you will prefer the ones without flush draw blocker, because OTB will continue to barrel often with turn flush draws. So if we as under the gun end up holding the ace of diamonds or the king of diamonds, it's less likely that OTB is bluffing on the turn. While with this hand, OTB still has those flush draws that he barrels. And then on the brick river, ace king might even be almost as good as a call down as a 9x. So you might think of a hand like pocket tens or a pair of nines as a more reasonable call down than ace king. But if we think that pocket jacks is basically the bottom of OTB's value jamming range on the river, doesn't really matter hand strength wise if you have pocket tens or a pair of nines or ace king high here. So with ace king, you block pocket aces, you block pocket kings, hands that are betting for value, and OTB's ace king or ace highs might barrel twice, bet flop and turn, and check back some amount of the time on the river. So I think the ace king blocking effects work in our favor in this hand, and it feels weird to call down with ace king high instead of some pairs, but I think it's actually pretty good here on this board. Next up, another interesting hand featuring our hero, ja.sam.gale. He limps the small blind and he limp calls versus a good aggressive regular in the big blind. So I don't know what the small blind strategy exactly is. I'm gonna guess he has a mixed strategy and he limps some of his continuing range in the small blind and he opens another part of his continuing range in the small blind. So he limp calls here. We see a check check, turn, check, bet and call. So big blind bets in the big blind. We can consider him as a preflop raiser. Well, he is the preflop raiser. We had a limp raise call. It's a decent board for the preflop raiser. And yeah, he will have some checkbacks that can still bet for value on turn and river. So it's not like his range is totally weak when he checks back. And then when the 5 pairs, he could have checked back a pair of 5s, and as a delayed bet he can still value bet some of the stronger eights and some pocket checks. He might also have some draws or weak draws or just weak hands that now decide to go for the delayed bet. Small blind check calls. And the river is interesting. It is a river that's probably going to be in the favor of the small blind, but I don't think it should get the response from small blind as it did. So we see ja.sam jam, donk jam the river for about 6 times spot, which is a really big jam, and he jams into a range that does have some pocket eights. Yes, it's more likely that ja.sam.gale has the top boat here, but the big blinds will have pocket eights in his range. So I do think it's a river where ja.sam can end up leading some amount. Yes, this is a river where small blind could have a leading range on. Obviously he has 8x for value, and as bluffs he has like pocket deuces to pocket fours. Those are good hands to bluff, and if he needs extra bluffs, there might be some queen high or king high or even ace high hands that he check called on the turn. Say a king high hand with a flush draw, maybe even some queen high hand with a flush draw, and he check calls on the turn. Those could be used as bluffs on the river. But this is a really big bet, and the bigger small blind bets, the less big blind needs to call to be defending enough. And at some point, the bet size gets so big that big blind just needs to call down with his 8x and is good. So we see a jack being donk jammed here, and that's just crazy in my opinion. Like it's a jack, it's still top pair. He has so many worse hands he could be bluffing with. I do not think he should be bluffing with jack-7 at all. Also, if you think about what he's trying to fold out, like he has jack-7, what is he trying to fold out? Yeah, it doesn't really make sense to me. Yes, it's the spot. He recognizes the spot as one he could be leading in, but not with this hand and not for this sizing, in my humble opinion. Now last up, another hand which will feature the interesting river donk jam. Spoiler alert. We have ja.sam.gale opening in the cutoff, getting 3-bet from the big blinds, facing 3-bet from ma 70. This is the ace high board. It seems like a good board for 3-better, and it is a decent board for the 3-better, but there are better boards. So not every player is gonna go for the 100% c-bet here for 1/3 pot bet. I think it only works versus players who don't defend enough on a board like this. So maybe I'll rewind. So we see a check from big blind, and Ja stabs for 1/3 pot. The stab size is fine. I think he could go a bit bigger on an ace high board. I think 1/3 pot again is good versus players who don't defend enough, and usually it's more used on some of the lower boards where you want to stab more of your hands, bet thinner for value and protection. So let's say if instead of an ace we had a deuce, then I think the 1/3 pot stab would be really fine. On an ace high board, usually you want to be betting a bit bigger or checking back, in my opinion. So you get a bet and a call. On the turn, brick turn, ja.sam.gale can definitely just barrel some hands for value. I think ace queen is probably the weakest hand. He should bet for value here. I think he also has ace king in his range, but not 100% of the time. 3-bet from the big blind versus the cutoff. While it does get a bit looser here with these later positions, it's still a 3-bet from the big blind instead of from the small blind. So I don't think cutoff is always 4-betting his ace-king here. Then as bluffs, obviously there are some flush draws, a hand like 9-8. But to show up with enough bluffs on this turn, I think ja.sam needs to put in some extra work. I think he should be barreling some deuces, threes, fours with a spade, for example. Maybe even sixes, maybe eights. I'm not really sure. But otherwise, he doesn't really have enough bluffs if he wants to bet a balanced range. Of course, that is always a thing to keep in mind. Do you want to bet a balanced range? Does villain have a balanced range? So he barrels the 5. Gets check called again. So on the flop, I think Mamama will be check calling with, he could have had like 7x as a bunch of the weaker ace x's. He has like pocket 10s to pocket kings, and he can be mixing in some flush draws himself to check call there. And then it gets interesting as he decides to donk jam on the king. Now, what do I think of this? It's not really easy to, I think, to totally analyze every detail of what might be going through big blind's head here. So with the king on the river, a noteworthy thing is that the cutoff won't be betting ace queen for value anymore. If the king was a deuce, then cutoff would probably bet ace queen for value on the river. But now when there's a king out, ace queen splits with every worse ace x Mamama has. So ace queen is not worthy of a value jam on the river anymore. Other than that, Mamama can think he has more ace kings and he still has some pocket kings in his range. This could be enough of a reason for him to donk jam this river. I don't think it's a play that adds that much EV or should occur that often. But he could jam ace king, maybe only kings for value on this river. And then as bluffs, well, he will have some worse hands than ace x. And I guess those need to be his bluffs. If he doesn't have worse hands than ace x, then well, maybe he can pick some of his weakest ace x to bluff with on the river. But when he shows ace queen, yeah, I don't think it's a hand that needs to be donk jammed. So if you do it with ace queen, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish. Like, you're trying to take a line that if ja.sam thinks like this line never gets bluffed and I need to hero fold, then the jam with ace queen is fine. And I guess that's what the donk jam is saying, that Mamama believes that ja.sam will make some hero folds there, will fold a bit too much for this line, and then ace queen becomes a good donk jam. But I think, yeah, it's just pushing it and not at all necessary. I think you just need to check call with the ace queen. If you have some donk jamming range, well, it depends on how you play earlier streets. So pocket kings for value. Maybe you still have 8-7, 7-6. That could be jam as a bluff on the river. Maybe you have some flush draw that check called, like a 9-8. If you decide to be tricky and check call it, maybe that can end up being a bluff on the river. And if you have a hand like ace-4, maybe you bluff with that instead of with the ace queen. Okay, but that's it for this week's hands. and I'll see you guys soon. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button to stay up to date, hit the notifications to stay really up to date, and feel free to share this video with any of your friends that might enjoy it. This would really help me out a lot as a starting YouTube channel to gain some momentum. See you in the next one.